Hey, how's it going everybody? It's Sketch and welcome back to the channel. And on today's show we're going to be looking at Resident Evil Village for the Xbox Series X and Xbox One. Developed and published by Capcom, releasing in May 7th of this year. This survival horror franchise has been around for quite some time now, and this latest entry shows they've still got their familiar tropes along with some new twists for the series. After clearing this about 3 times so far and taking some time with the game's mercenary mode, there's actually quite a bit to say about our boy Ethan Winters' European adventure. So let's give the kid a hand and let's get into this installment story. In Resident Evil Village, we reconnect with Ethan Winters 3 years after the events of Resident Evil 7, which finds our protagonist relocated to Europe with his wife Mia and newborn daughter Rose. After her bedtime, your home is rushed by a seemingly unknown team, but then is revealed to be led by Chris Redfield. After a brief skirmish, you find yourself in an overturned van and make your way to the undisclosed village just up the way. Your daughter has been abducted and your mission is to get her back at any cost. Ethan will go through a veritable gauntlet of lycans, vampires, and various other creations that inhabit the land. Once you arrive, you'll quickly notice there is something off here, and also if you play Resident Evil 4, this will feel very familiar since in a lot of ways it's hit several similar story and gameplay beats, but now in first person. And for the sake of anyone who hasn't played Resident Evil Village yet, I'll try to avoid any major spoilers, but in short, if you're a fan of Resident Evil 4 and wondered what that could have been like if it were in first person, then look no further than Resident Evil Village. As far as gameplay, you've got a first person survival horror game that's rather heavy on the action. There's a few sections that lean into the horror aspect a bit more than others, but overall, it's a pretty over the top action game which rides the fine line of what some may expect from an RE game. It doesn't quite get to the boulder punching levels, but it's fun with what it throws at you through the game's 8 to 10 hour runtime. You'll get clears faster after the first one, but once you get the unlockable arsenal and the updates, you'll be damn near unstoppable. In typical Resident Evil form, you'll start in the main village, which will act as a hub for the other houses and castles you'll visit over the course of the game in pursuit of Mother Miranda, the ringleader of this motley crew. Castle Dimitrescu is the first of 4 main sections you'll encounter, and this is a fairly strong section in the game since it hits some, at times, Spencer Mansion vibes. And this is where you'll see a lot of familiar tropes to previous games, along with Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters hunting you as you traverse the estate. Also, Lady D, va-va-voom, am I right? As you progress to later sections like the House of Beneviento is a puzzle-based section where your arsenal is stripped from you. This part legit has some moments, especially on the first time, that are legitimately creepy, and the chase sequence is straight up nightmare fuel. But this part too has the feel of classic Resident Evil and almost feels like what may have been had the Silent Hills demo actually have been fully released. The Island of Moreau also has some heavy Resident Evil 4 vibes and is all just straight up action, whilst draining the area's reservoir and restarting the windmills in that section. Once you get to Heisenberg's stronghold, the game is nearing its end, and this section is kind of where things falter a little bit, while also feeling familiar to past entries. You'll go through the factory and deal with several new abominations, one of which Capcom is in legal disputes over currently, oddly enough. The boss encounters here are also pretty all over the top, especially once you get to the bit with the mini tank, which is also pretty awesome. The Duke is the merchant, and this colossal fellow is somewhat of a Sherpa for your run through the village and outlying areas. He'll give you clues about where to go next, as well as sell you upgrades and extra items. If you find certain food ingredients around the area, he'll also cook you up some nice meals that will permanently buff your stats. He's also got some familiar catchphrases you might remember, depending on if you can get them to trigger. What are you buying? Inventory management is also back, but it can also be upgraded to have a bigger suitcase, much like Resident Evil 4, and you can craft several different items from health to ammunition so long as you have the materials and recipes. In a pinch, you can craft whatever you need depending on the situation, which will come in clutch more often than not. Altogether, there's some familiar beats seen throughout, as well as some sprinklings of new story elements and lore as far as the cast of characters and how this all ties into previous entries. Gunplay here feels really good, and the action set pieces are all, for the most part, really fun. The parts where things slow down a bit and are more exploration based yield some very interesting finds also. Graphics wise, this is running on the updated RE engine, and this is one of the game's strongest suits. It looks gorgeous and has some stunning visuals and environments. The village itself has some great looking locales, and Castle Dimitrescu also has several highlights location wise. The lighting and graphical effects here look just as good, if not a notch better than Resident Evil 7. The shift in locales here range from the more Victorian feel early on to the more grindhouse inspired stronghold, which have some solid looking spots, so when the action wanes a bit, take a moment and look around at the scenery. The final arenas leading up to the encounter with Mother Miranda also look pretty sick. Enemies this time around are more geared towards lycans and hybrid werewolves, which at first I was a little bit apprehensive about, but after playing it, it works out rather well. While this time we don't have a lot of different enemy types, what we do get here is a variation of lycans, some shambling ghouls in the castle's catacombs, and later on in the game, some biomechanical creations which require hitting in certain critical spots to put down. Boss encounters here are all over the shop, but are mostly bombastic features with the exception of the Beneviento boss fight, which that's not so much a fight as it is more of a hunt. Either way, these characters really spring to life with their graphical prowess, and each encounter has their own feel and aesthetic, which is cool to see Resident Evil trying out some new things, but keeping its core mainly intact. Sound-wise, this is also pretty dope with a lot of atmospheric vibes here. The game's musical score feels like something straight out of a movie with constant audio stabs and ethereal chords. It's got a similar vibe musically to some parts of House of a Thousand Corpses. The tunnel scene mainly comes to mind with parts of the soundtrack featured within Resident Evil Village, and horror buffs should definitely be able to appreciate what's happening here. Voice acting is fairly well done, with the cast of characters really sending their performances. Lady Dimitrescu and Heisenberg are amongst the more animated of the lot and have a lot of one-liners and quotable segments throughout the game. The other passers-by you'll meet in the village have that B-movie horror vibe nailed, with lines and delivery that you can tell are foreshadowing events soon to unfold. Sound effects work here is also beefy with some nice weapon sounds and vivid cues of impacts. The creaks and cricks you'll hear while playing have a lived-in feel, and the Foley art is beyond solid here. The atmosphere that gets created audibly here is truly something. From the snarls of the Lycans to the gargle tangents of Moreau, there's some pretty dynamic ranges here in the audio, and it's definitely got bits that will resonate far after it's over. Overall, Resident Evil Village is a strong entry into the Resident Evil franchise, and it's truly a blast to play through. The first clear will take the most time, but every subsequent clear after that will get progressively faster. The current record held is an hour and change, so once you figure everything out, you'll literally be able to fly through it. The game is far from a pushover since there are several difficulty spikes, but it is a ride to play through. The puzzles really aren't that difficult, and it's got a heavy emphasis on action, so this has a little bit of something for everyone. There's only a few small nitpicks I have with this one, but it's easy to recognize. While maybe not a favorite entry, this entry is definitely sitting comfortably at a top tier. Resident Evil Village gets an 8.5 out of 10 and comes highly recommended to survival horror fans as well as fans of FPS games, since this one checks off most of the boxes one would want in a game like this. It's got a lot of stuff to do, and watching the story develop the first time and the times after is really something. The cast of characters really bring this one together, and the story is actually fairly interesting even with its retreaded tropes and twists, some more obvious than others. Once you get your fill in the story mode, there's also the mercenary mode available for a more arcade style action, so it's got some variety. At full price, this one is totally worth it, and once it starts hitting that discount phase, it's only just more worth it, so check this one out definitely. This is available on the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series X, and the PC. You can't really go wrong with any of these, so if you're a long time or new Resident Evil fan, surely check this one out. And thank you again for checking out this video. If you find these videos helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you can use it as a resource. Check back often. We'll have more reviews and commentaries coming up in the near future. But until then, take it easy, stay safe out there, and I'll see you on the next one.